My name's Monk Rowe, and we're in the Fillius Jazz Archive with Denis DiBlasio, monstrous baritone saxophonist and jazz educator.
I already don't like where this is going.
Okay, well, we'll see if we can get better.
Yeah, all right.
You know, I appreciate the fact that you've been sort of walking around this space and oohing and eyeing. Like,
oh, yeah. Oh.
you've got the lineage and you know.
Oh, no, this is holy ground here.
Do you find that the road work you did with Maynard and whomever else affects your teaching?
Oh, yeah. Oh, gosh, yeah. Yeah.
How so?
Well, when I'm teaching, I'm always thinking, I guess, without being conscious of it, like what happened on the road. You know, just like little things like being on time. Something like being on time, right? So we're teaching these students about showing up, and without the road, it's just you're late for class. That's not cool. But with that experience that I've had, is you can get fired for this. You can lose your whole job for this. Musicians who are successful, they're like notorious for like being on time. Especially if you're a drummer, you know, an 8 o'clock job, you're there at 6 o'clock trying to deal with steps, you know, that kind of thing. And that whole aspect of I mean, that's just one example, but yeah, I tend to look at it very, I bring a lot of what and I can't separate it. So a lot of what I'm teaching the kids, being on time, make sure you play. Like Maynard he had two great quotes. He said, when you get on the band, you know, the road manager gets you, he tells you all the rules, and then someone else tells you something else. This is how things are going to be. Then Maynard comes in and he goes, all right, everybody. You know, he had that, you know, remember the penguin in the old Batman movie, like he was doing helium? You know, he had that like, you know, he sounded like that. That's how Maynard used to sound. So Maynard would come in and goes, all right, guys, you know, the two rules are be on time and play your ass off. All right, meeting's over. You know? So that was it. And then what happens is, you know, that's very short, but as you're out there and you're saying that's everything, really. Yeah, you've seen guys get fired because they don't play well or because you don't show up. There's big consequences to that. If somebody hires a band, they want 15 people and the person's late going up, they breach a contract because they only count 14 and don't have to pay you because somebody's late. You know, it's huge. So you don't realize that as a kid. So when I'm teaching, I that kind of thing, and others are.
Well, that makes sense. With on your website, I saw you chose 3 adjectives to describe your teaching and what you want to get across, and one of them was relevance, and that caught my eye because I think you can learn a lot of stuff in academia that may not apply when you get out on the real world. And so teaching something relevant to a jazz musician, I think, is important.
Yeah, I think so, sure, yeah, because it's so, you just don't know. You know, they don't know what, things like sight reading, things that are really going to matter. Getting along with people, accountability. I think I know now what you're talking about. Yeah, but I remember one point when I was off, someone was saying, you know, if you could kind of bring it all down, kind of haiku it all, you know, get it all down to a little, like these nuggets. Almost anything I've seen being out on the road and teaching, you could almost get reduced to these 3 things. Accountability, like are you on time, that kind of thing. Can you play? That's the main, you know, you have to be able to play your instrument, whatever it is. And can you get along with people? Something you learn by the time you're like in 1st grade, even before. You know, those 3 things. So it's like accountability, can you play whatever the job is, and do you get along, like the people skills. Because when I've seen people be successful, they're usually good at all of those, or really good at least 2 of them. And when I see people get fired, not just from the road, but anywhere, it's usually because of one of those. Somebody, you can't rely on them, they don't show up, they're not dressed right, they won't show up for the job, or they just can't. I've seen people actually keep someone who can't play as well if they get along and they're always there. You know, it's almost like the playing could almost take the back seat if the other things are well. But I've seen great players that just they would get fired. The thing about the road is you have to really mess up to get fired off of Maynard's band. What they do is he takes so many breaks in between tours, you just might not get asked back. You know what I mean? So if you do 3 tours a year, if there's only 2 weeks left of a tour, well, you can finish that out, and then you might not be on the next one.
Yeah.
So, and that's another reality, that is no one comes and yells at you anymore. Like when you're in high school or something, if you're late and you get yelled at, or that's a warning, because when you get out there, no one has to yell. The phone just doesn't ring. You're looking at the phone, come on, come on, and it's not doing anything. So that's another thing that is, you know, and I tell them all these types of stories, just like we're talking here, you know, and that tends to make more sense to them than, like we were talking earlier about, just like teaching. When I tell them a story of it, they tend to get it a little bit. I think somebody said the brain remembers something that's linear, like a story, than it will just a basic fact. So stories, that's why the whole story thing, I'm using it more and more. That's why this stuff you're doing is so great, because it's just like stories. I know this isn't about you,
Well,
but
when you got on Maynard's band, were you thrown into playing situations that you didn't feel you were prepared for? I'll give you an example. I saw.
What are you getting at, man?
I saw a video when you were with him, and you guys it was an outdoor thing on a stage, and you were playing Salt Peanuts.
Oh, that's in Japan in the summer.
So you're up there playing this outrageous solo, and then you started scat singing, and then the whole band stopped, and you're scat singing in front of what sounded like a pretty large audience.
Yeah, it was
by yourself. Now, what's my point? I was thinking that probably you're not described as a shy person. And
I don't know.
I think I think it has something to do with your personality, the fact that you could get up there and do that. What do you think?
Is that a question? Oh, okay.
I think it's a question. I think the question is.
I think there's a certain amount of yes to that. I think but Maynard was. I mean, this is a lot about Maynard, but there's not a day that goes by I don't think about this guy since I've been off the road, because he was such an influence in a lot of different ways. So going back to that being ready for it, a friend from Miami, when I was going to school in Miami, was on Maynard's band, and he called and he said I was finished my graduate program studies down there, and I was going to stay in Miami. I wasn't going to come back to Philly. I was kind of involved with the jazz scene a little bit, and now the school was over, I could get involved more, and I had some friends that played in some of the Afro-Cuban groups down there. I was going to stay down there. And a lot of guys were from either like the Eastman area or North Texas State or Miami. So when this Miami crew would come back to Miami from being a break from Maynard's band, I would see these guys on and off. And one fella, Eric Traub, great tenor player, he just passed away. Great.
I know him.
You know Eric?
He went to Fredonia.
Yeah. Oh, well, he was the one who got me on.
Okay.
Eric came down, he was a great player. And he said, look, they're going to be looking for a Barry player. And I had a tenor, I didn't even play Barry. And I said, okay, all right. I mean, this is stop me whenever you want, because I'll just keep talking. But I made a tape. I got a Jamie Ingersoll play along. Paying dues. It was the one where he wrote his own melodies because he didn't want to have to pay royalties. So instead of Body and Soul, it was Flesh and Spirit, or what is this thing called Love? It was called What Is This, or whatever. Anyway, I love it. I had a swing, upswing, a funk track, and a ballad, because I knew Maynard's band was about energy. I borrowed a baritone sax from this fella Tom Moon, who was a great Barry player, and he wrote that book, 1,000 Tunes You Should Hear Before You Die. You know those books. Anyway, he's a friend of mine. I got his Barry, I borrowed it, I made a tape, boom, sent it out. Then I get a phone call, and it's the office says, well, we heard the tape, and Maynard would like to have you come out. In 10 days, we're going to start in West Allison, up in West Allison, Minnesota, maybe, I don't know, I forget where. Anyway, So I was like, whoa, okay. And this is for Barry. So I had to buy a Barry, pack up Miami, and move everything back home to Philly in 10 days. And the whole time, see, you know what the problem is, Monk? Every time I say something, there's like a branch of another story that shoots off, and I'm trying to self-edit myself so I can get to some point here. But anyway, I got on the band. I cut out 5 other stories to get there. But I got the audition, I got on the band, and when I was on the band, I was, I show up, and you kind of meet your roommate, and we're going to have a rehearsal because we have a bunch of new guys. So to your question of are you ready, out of school, and we set up, and we're going to read this. The guys are getting set. You're meeting some of the guys. I don't really know anybody, so you sit down in your chair, and everybody hands out the music. And the first thing we played is Blue Birdland. Bop, boo, boo, doo, da, doo, da, da, da. That's his walk-on thing. And I'm looking at it and say, they're eighth notes. Okay, this isn't going to be that hard. Like, I could read eighth notes. I'm good. The whole time I'm worried about what you're talking about. Like, when is this, what makes this something special as opposed to like a great college group or something. What's this about? Like, what's Woody's band about, and Basie and Duke and Buddy's band? What makes those bands that band? So we start playing it, and Maynard walks in, and I see him, and he just comes in and he's talking. I didn't even meet him yet, and he's like, "Hey guys, all right, let's just let's just play it." I'm thinking, what kind of guy sounds like the Penguin and Batman? What the what the heck? So I'm just looking. Anyway, we play this thing, and I'm thinking, whoa, this just doesn't feel good. This feels good, but a real strong good. It's a deeper groove. It's G blues, but it's like, whoa, this is feeling okay. So and then the band comes in, pop, boot, and there's some new guys. So it's not it isn't ragged, but I'm like, wow, that's all right. This kind of feels good. It feels like you would be in a what you would have if you were in a band that was playing together for a while already, the very first read. So I was like, whoa, okay. So, and then he comes in like, ba da 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 da, and I was like, what was that? And I was like, I never heard that. I never heard it. I mean, I never heard a sound that had that everything in it. It was like what we talked about earlier about Cannonball. He hit an E above the staff or something, and it had a personality to it. He didn't play any other note. He pegged the note, and I was like, what? Because the note felt like a couple things. It had stuff in it. It had a core to it. It was like kind of like baked, and the outside skin of it was like baked in sizzle, and the note had a tendency, like it felt like it was going to shoot up if you didn't contain it. It wasn't just sharp. It had this like, I was like, what the heck is that? And he goes, zoom, and then like he would let it go, and I was like, whoa. And that's when I thought, whoa, he didn't even play anything yet. He played like 2 notes, and already I graduated. And I was like, holy smokes. So there was a commitment that was different, And then I kind of, and it didn't have to be like the highest note, or it doesn't have to be the loudest note, but there was kind of like a total commitment to that. Like every time he played, I really felt like when I noticed it in Buddy. I noticed it when I saw Bill Evans play in Philly it used to be the old Showboat. It was called the Bijou. Bill Evans doing it with a ballad, Jimmy Scott singing a ballad, McCoy Tyner, Elvin Jones. There's certain people that whatever they do, even though technically you could write it out and it's so simple, but the commitment behind it, when you hear it, there's something in it. They play like they're going to die tomorrow. They play like this is the last, and that saying, this is the last day I might play, is like a real thing with some of these guys, And when like when you hear, I saw Sonny Rollins, but I couldn't believe it. I was like, wow, you can do that? You can play, and then you can analyze it. Oh, he's playing in C pentatonic on A minor. That's not it. That's the backdoor thing, how you can analyze it. But hearing Maynard play this note, and you could see, and a lot of guys could play high, but this one pitch had like 4 things going on at the same time, and I was like, holy cow, and it was joyful. That was another thing. Question 2?
Well, And it just
please laugh.
it just occurred to me.
By myself
they're laughing with us, not at us. But when you said that, I got this image when I listened to Cannonball.
Yeah.
And it's funny that Mercy Mercy, of course, was a funny tune for him because he didn't even solo. But when he played that song, that note, like, how you described it, even though you can't describe it, but you did pretty well.
It's a thing. The pitch itself has chapters in it, you know, and I don't know if they're trying to do that, but I think it's a result of a certain kind of commitment. And it doesn't have to be like when Bill Evans does a ballad. That's like some deep. It's like wow. So there's like a depth as opposed to. Well, I don't know. There's just kind of this depth that I felt with it, and the band caught it, and the band would, you know, the bass player would lay it down a little stronger, and it kind of spread, but it kind of spread from him when you have a playing leader like that.
Okay.
And as the tour got on, it got better. But I remember you talking about sound. I did a thing one time, and it was a Maynard tribute, and I was able to play next to Don Mensa. So we started talking about like big sounds. I said, who did you hear that had the biggest sound? And without even skipping a beat, he says, Gene Ammons. I said, really? Because I never heard Gene Ammons live. I heard him on the recording. He goes, Gene Ammons. He says, you walk into a club, and Gene Ammons could be around the corner playing acoustic, and you think the sound's coming from behind you. It's just so huge, big, but it's more than just loud. It has that, whatever that is. I still don't know what it is, but I know when I hear it. And people have that's why I was talking about Jane Ira Bloom. She plays like a beautiful note on soprano. I was like, that's it.
But that's what makes those people stand out, because you can't say what it is. And to me, that's like the magic of it. And you can only analyze things so far. At least this, in my opinion, if you try to.
Well, I think you can analyze. I think that's all you can do is analyze it, but and that's okay and that's good. But I think all that is in service of the sound that we like, you know. And if we're not listening a lot, then we can really fall in love with the analysis. And there's, you know, you write books on analysis. I have half of them are mine, you know. But it still doesn't get you when you hear it. Yeah, Maynard didn't do anything. He played an E, you know. And you know, Bill Evans, he played a chord. Who was telling me a story about it was Bill Evans' birthday, and a bunch of piano. Harold Danko, maybe Andy Laverne. A bunch of guys were at Bill's apartment, and they were all played a tune. They were sitting around just having some drinks while Bill had this upright, and each one played a tune for Bill, and maybe 5 guys, or maybe McNeely was telling me this. I forget when we did these Jamie camps. Anyway, they all played it, and then Bill gets on the same piano, and as soon as he touches it, they all looked at each other like, what just happened? All of a sudden, the sound's different. Same piano, like Bill's touch or his intent, or what is that? You can't put that in a book. You can't make money selling that in a book. That's just, that's a thing. And I think a lot of it's intent, like where are you coming from? I love Yusef Lateef. Right? His sound, his tenor sound on those Cannonball things are just great. But I was reading, there's a biography about him, and I remember reading, or I read somewhere about a student, or I was talking to someone who studied with him when he was in Amherst. He taught, and he got into the mouthpiece thing, okay? And he brought a couple different mouthpieces to Yusef. Yusef, will you listen to this? You know, maybe 4 mouthpieces. He goes, oh yeah, sure. And the student puts it on. It's the student telling the story, and he plays it for Yusef. And Yusef says, that has a nice core. And he goes, all right, puts another different one on, and he plays it for Yusef. And Yusef says, that has a beautiful warmth around it. And then the other guy puts another one on. What about that? And he goes, that has I'm paraphrasing, but you know, that has a darkness that's very wooden, like it's coming from nature. And this guy's thinking, what he wants Yusef to say is play that one. And everybody else it is brighter or it's darker, but Yusef is, this has that. So after he plays all 4, and he says, Yusef, I want you to tell me, you know, like, what do you think? And Yusef goes, well, they all have different characteristics that are all beautiful. Because Yusef isn't, if you ever check out his blindfold test, he looks for something good in everybody. He's not, I love him. So anyway, the student says, well, Yusuf, when you're, here you go, talk about where people are from, and when you hear people and you're thinking, what is that thing that they're doing that I hear, but I don't know what it is. Is it intent or whatever? So he goes to Yusuf, he says, I'm doing these 4 mouthpieces for you, and you're not helping me. And he goes, well, they all have their own thing. He goes, well, what are you looking for? What is it that you look for in your mouthpiece? And he goes, I'm thinking of creating the feel of a mother embracing her child. Whoa. So is it the link? Yeah, I mean, you know what so it's like, whoa. So I think sometimes they're just people are coming from such a different place, and if you really can park yourself like in that, and then you play, and so when I heard that, I went back and I listened to Yusuf, and there's a certain warmth about everything he does, even if he plays oboe or he plays some instrument. There's an approach or an intent, or there's something, and maybe is it the intent that you pick up that you kind of can't grab, maybe, you know what I mean? But that's a whole thing. And when you see people like Maynard play, he just loved it. Maynard would play trumpet on anything. You could write him a rock tune. He'd play that rocky thing every night. Da da da. He hits his notes. But he loves playing the trumpet so much that he just wants to play the trumpet. He'll play that tune over and over every night because he loves the trumpet. It's almost like everything else is secondary, just the joy of playing trumpet. So we would look at the book, and he said, we could use a bebop tune. Now, so, even out the set so you don't have too much of one thing. And he just wanted to play.
Did you want to, after that period of your life was over, did you feel like now I should change my sound because I'm not playing in a pretty powerful band? Now I'm going back to smaller group things. Should I change my sound, or did you just go with what you already had?
No, I mean, I had to figure that out. I mean, once I realized that band plays that way. I mean, every band has their, especially if you have a playing leader, like Buddy's band had a sound because the way Buddy played, Maynard had a sound. Bassies, with Freddie Green, they all had like their sound. So once I figured out how to play with that, and I enjoyed that energy kind of thing. So that energy thing was always something that really fit. It was a good fit for me because it didn't feel like Maynard liked a happy band. I like to be happy. It was energetic at times, and he would always give you like a solo, mellow moment if you wanted it for everybody. And so no, I didn't change it. It kind of, when I was playing tenor, I always liked the big sound, like the Dexter and the Sonny Rollins and the guys that could, that filled it up. And I think I kind of heard lower. I had, the subtone thing. So when I played Barry, it felt like it fit. But I think it was no, it didn't really change anything. I think if it did anything, I kind of found it.
Okay.
What I liked,
I think you and I had a shared experience when we were younger, and that is hanging out in record stores and flipping through the things and trying to make your choice. And where did that desire come from?
I don't know. I think it was when I think back, the earliest thing that I can remember was that it was something that was fun. You know what I mean? Like sports were fun, other things. The music was fun. I had friends that were into that were fun. But I do remember my mother was a cook, like for a hospital, came from a big Italian family. She cooked for like 10 people. She can't cook for less than 20 people. It's just like impossible. And then my dad worked as like in the construction area, putting gas lines in, like the developments and stuff. So when they came home, they were really tired. They worked, and I remember they would put music on, and as soon as they would put music on, it was usually some kind of jazz, like big band stuff. My dad loved Boots Randolph. Remember Boots Randolph, Big Sound. I didn't know Boots Randolph came from Coleman Hawkins. You know, if you listen to some of that, well, if you listen to Coleman, you can see where he was copying it from. You know, Coleman wasn't getting it from Boots, but, you know, all that subtone thing. And, I mean, if he wasn't playing yakety sax and all that, but that just big sound, my dad loved it. Jazz, my dad loved it. And they would actually, like, kind of dance in the living room to, like, you know, they coming up. So my dad was in his construction clothes. My mother came home from the kitchen, and I'm a little kid sitting on the couch just looking at it, thinking, oh, this is fun. This is fun. This is happy. This is happy. So you kind of associate, I guess, the sound with what the feeling was. And then I remember, I think it must have been Duke's Band, and I couldn't remember. There was TV was black and white, and it was a shot from the Barry player through to the piano player. So it was either like Count Basie or Duke or something was on TV. And my dad came home, and I remember I'm sitting on the couch watching this, and my dad was sitting down, just came home, took his boots off, and it was winter. He had that insulated underwear that they used to wear, and he's just watching the TV, and my mother's cooking in the kitchen, and this band is playing, and my dad's looking at the TV, and he's talking to it. He's like, but he's like, get it, man. Get it. And I'm like, Dad's talking to the TV. It sounds cool. Mom's cooking something good. He's happy. This is good. And so it all became a thing. So I think, to me, it was always like a tonic. You know, I mean, I'm not conscious of that. But, you know, so at one point when I wanted to play an instrument, I wanted to play sax, because in the window of the saxophone, in the music store, there was an alto, and it was shiny. It was shiny because the way the building was, the orientation of the building is the sun would go down, and the time I would walk by it would be at night. So the sun hit this alto sax around 5 o'clock, and it would shine, and that's the time I would alto. And the guy who put it together, where you put your thumb, he put a nickel. An Indian head nickel, and you could just see it. I thought, oh my gosh, I want one of those because it's shiny, and it comes with a nickel. So we go in, and the teacher said, oh, you're going to file this interview, Monk. So anyway, so what happens is I go in, I said, I want to play sax. So we go in, and the music store, the guy says, you should play clarinet first. You should do clarinet. And I was like, but it's not shiny. It doesn't have a nickel on it. And my mom's like, well, you think that's a good thing to do? And it turns out, best thing ever. But I wanted the saxophone, because play the clarinet, and saxophone's going to be a lot easier to go to. And I was like, oh, okay. So the clarinet I had was one of those solid metal jobs, you know, and maybe that's why he wanted to get this thing out of the shop or something. But I played it, and sure enough, you know, if you're teaching that, if you just learn sax and go to clarinet, oof, it could be a nightmare. But I did that, and then when I got the saxophone, that was it. But it was always a fun thing, you know. It was always my folks just liked to hear me play it. I was never pressured. And it was just a thing that was fun, like anything else was fun. But I always associate it with that fun thing. And then when I went to college, you know, you get into these little camps like who likes who, and, you know, who doesn't like who. If I like the guy you like, but you don't like who I like. And then I got a little unbalanced there for a minute. Then when I got with Maynard he liked everything. Maynard almost liked music like I liked it when I started. It was almost like Mufasa, the circle of jazz life, I guess.
Well said.
I guess, but you know, he was there. Maynard, who do you like? I like everybody. Bunny Berrigan, Clifford, Mitt Winton is great, and you know, he liked everybody. And I was like, oh my God! So you don't have that disease that I just had. You know what I'm talking about?
I do. So when you got to a point and you started listening to music that wasn't necessarily fun, but was more intense and emotional, like some of Coltrane's music.
Oh, I mean, like happy. Yeah,
it wasn't like, happy.
Well, okay, well, yeah.
Did it take you a while to get into it, or did you just open up?
No, I mean, I listened to everything. I was listening to just about everything. I knew that, I mean, at that time, by the time I was even in college, I knew that there were some recordings that, because I already went through it quite a few times, where maybe I didn't like something, and 6 months later I did. That I did this, and I messed this up. Yeah, you know, so I was sometimes Coltrane always felt like it was really deep spiritual thing to me. Coltrane wasn't. I mean, it's like here we go again with intent and approach. You know, if you look at the album, the inside notes of Love Supreme, you know, it's like Bach, to the glory of God, everything you wrote, you know, you signed it, you know. So if that's your intent, you can kind of you sense that's what it is. Whereas you know, someone else, you would feel something different. But no, I mean, it was really changing. Jazz was changing. You had the fellas that still played swing, and the guys that played Dixieland, and then the guys that played big band, and then the guys that played bebop. Then you had the hard bop guys, and you had the cool fellas. And this was at the time when people are starting to play out a little more, a lot of melodic minor stuff, play on both sides of the tune, key-wise. There was all these techniques that were being used that, you know, so a lot was happening. But it was, I felt that as soon as, well, going to University of Miami was great for me because a lot of my harmonic questions were answered there because they had great teachers. You know, they had people like Gary Lindsay, Vince Maggio, Ronnie Miller, and I'm leaving a bunch of guys out, but they, you know, to get this sound, you do this. You still have to make art with it. You still have to create and say something with it. And then, and they would bring people in. Like Liebman would come in. Man, Liebman, what a teacher that. Liebman is, whew. Someone asked Dave, you know, when you play over a pedal, where do you go? I never forget this clinic. He came in, and I was so intimidated. And he was such a nice, he's so nice, but you know, Dave's confident. Dave's great. He's coming in, and boom, here it is. And you know, if you're a little shy, you're gonna, the wave's gonna come right over you. Boom, it's gonna keep going. So Dave's up there, and like he's playing, and half the guys are like, "What's he doing? What's he saying?" So Dave, I think, is trying to teach everybody what he's doing, so you can follow it. So someone says, "What do you do like when you play over a pedal?" He just finished playing a tune. He goes, "Well, you can do a lot." He goes, "You can link some triads." He goes, "So pick a pedal." And someone says E. And he goes, "All right, give me a triad." And somebody says E triad. He goes, all right, that's good." He goes, "Give me another triad." Somebody says B. He goes, "Not good, because B and E spell a larger E chord. Wrong triad. Give me another." And he goes, "I did something wrong." "You didn't do anything wrong." So Dave said, "Give me another one." Somebody says F. He goes, "Good, F. Give me one more." And I don't know, they give him another. So he goes, "Okay, here's E, boop, boop, bop. Here's F, do, do, that. And here's like, I don't know, A, do, do, dee." He goes, "Doodle that, doodle that, doodle dee." He goes, "Okay, I want to play over this pedal, and I'm just going to link these three triads over and over again." Okay, and the guy goes, "Doom, doom, doom." And Dave's like, "Boodle, starts easy, doodle that, and you get it, and he's doodle that, doodle that, doodle that, do that, do that, and do beep, doodle. He starts to rhythmize it and stretch some things out. And it's the sound that I've been hearing that I never understood. So I look at my watch, it took 3 minutes. And I was thinking, that's when I realized there are teachers that are just as heavy as there are players as heavy as they play. For years, I'm trying to figure that thing out. And Dave explained, I mean, I was ready to understand it, and I heard that thing, but I was questioning it. I was always trying to analyze it. Well, how does this fit over G minor? Well, the point is it doesn't. That's what you're going for. So Dave would explain it and do it, and I was like, I would actually get mad because I thought, if I would have known this 5 years ago, I could have done it. He's such a strong teacher. And that's when I realized that, and when I taught at Jamie Aebersold camps, I met people like Dan Hurley and Jerry Coker and David Baker and Jamie. I mean, some of these guys can teach like at the level of the way some people play because they can explain it so easy. So there's almost like a Mount Rushmore of jazz educators that I have in my head that have, and I borrow their stuff. I've taught at those camps. I've seen the way they teach, and I'm just stealing everything, and I'm just dumping it on my students.
Yeah, don't call it stealing. Call it research.
Oh.
That's a Jerry Dodgen.
No, that's right,
quote. Research.
Yeah, that's right. That's
Okay.
right. I'm investigating and I'm discovering it, and hence
Right.
I will share it.
But you're funny. You just said something about it didn't fit. It didn't fit. And I was looking at something that you did, and I don't know if this is the first time ever, but
What the heck is that?
this is rhythm changes, and the compositional device that you are riffing on is Messiaen's mode of limited transposition number 3. Do you recall this?
Do I have to call security? Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. That's
So-
from the online grad. You pulled that off of that?
Yeah.
Look
okay.
at you. You're a detective. This is your life. Let me say, yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, I'm
yes.
asking.
Yes.
I'm asking about
Okay.
this is minutia,
Okay.
but you've got this line going up. You've got B
Mhm.
flat to G7, and then
Mhm.
there's this line going up, ba ba da ba da ba. Then it lands on a G flat under the G7 chord.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so explain that to me. Why can you do that? Why can you have a G flat
Did you pay for the course?
under a G7?
No. So here's the thing. If you look at, let me back up.
Yeah.
All right. So we're this is we're going to talk about this stuff.
Just-
okay. This
just
is no. I'm good with it.
okay.
I'm good with it. This is fine. We'll come back to this, but let me explain something to you. So I have this book of Michael Brecker solos, and I'm looking at this thing. I'm trying to analyze it. Man, I am looking at this thing, and there's D minor, and Mike's not playing anything in D minor. And I'm like, what the heck is he? So I'm looking at E flat, and I'm trying to figure G flat. Well, that's the flat 9. That's the plus 9 of this. That's this. That's that. And I'm thinking, what the? I'm trying to. I'm using the. I'm trying to ram a technique from column B into a column A understanding, right? So I'm trying to pull all this stuff over. Then we go play North Texas State, right? And Rich Madison was one of the guys who taught there. Rich Madison, great educator, and he passed away. But when we went to his house, we're eating. I said, Rich, I'm looking at this solo, and I can't figure out what Mike is doing. Mike is playing on this D minor, and he's moving. He goes like, oh no, it's simple. And there it is. I'm killing myself trying to figure this out. He goes, no, no, no. Mike notes both sides of the tune. I said, what are you talking about? He goes, look at a tune like it's a sandwich. Okay? Look at a tune like it's a sandwich. Now, you don't know what, you don't get this, but once I explain it, it's like a Liebman thing. You'll think, oh, is that what it is? So as you look at a tune like it's a sandwich, let's say you're going to play Take the A Train in C. Well, the middle of the sandwich, whatever it is, it's tuna. The tune is the tune in the key of C. Well, you learn it also in the key of C sharp, and you learn it in the key of B. So you learn a tune in 3 keys. You don't learn it in 1. And then what you do is as you're playing in 1, you just slide up to the next key, because as soon as you do that, it's going to be dissonant. And then you come back when you want to resolve it. So you can pull dissonance from any spot you want based on when you go up or down a half step and come back in. So I'm saying, wait a minute. You mean everything I've been trying to figure out for 4 months is really just... He goes, yes, some people call it planing, some people call it sidestepping. He goes, well, what it is, it's a way to create tension. So instead of trying to get a chord and alter it and build it more and get on the top and lower the 13th and do all that, there's a whole other technique that isn't like that. It's superimposing stuff that doesn't fit because it's tension. You want tension. So anytime you want tension on any chord, you can just slide up and come back. He goes, the thing about Mike is his technique is so great, he doesn't miss. When he scoops out and scoops back down. So when you come back, as soon as you come back in, you resolve it. There's resolution on any chord. So I was like, wow, now that's easy to understand. What's that? It's another 3 minutes, right?
Yeah.
Now to do it and practice it is a whole other thing, but to understand the concept like Dave was doing in Miami, that's what I mean. So I'm seeing these great teachers I'm knocking myself out trying to figure this out. So I said, well, this is a whole different kind of theory. This has nothing to do with altered chords. You're actually playing in another key. And he goes, oh yeah. He goes, that's Bartók. Bartók would write string quartets where he would write the first violin in G Aeolian, the second violin in F whole tone, the diminished scale for the viola, and the chromatic scale for the bass. And he shared the same shape, but they were all writing. He said, we borrowed all that stuff from the 20th century guys. So what was happening as the 20th century guys are playing with harmony, we're in there researching, and we're doing that. And at the same time, like Stravinsky's coming to check out drummers, jazz drummers. He wrote the thing for Woody Herman's band, Ebony Concerto. They're getting rhythms from us. We're getting harmony from them, and you could hear Miles doing some of that stuff early on, where he just played like in another key. So he goes, it's a matter of dissonance. So instead of playing the changes and grabbing these different alterations of the changes, just learn it in 2 other keys, and whenever you want tension, you slip and you come back in. When you're in another key, you got to make something happen. You have to be melodic, but that's what makes it kind of grind. So when that happened, I said, well, then those are completely different rules now, right? Aren't we talking about? And he goes, well, it's like 20th century harmony applied to tunes. So when he said that, I was like, whoa, okay, so then I started looking into that, and then the people who are on the forefront of like the breaking, not the traditional jazz playing, but like in your interview with Snooky and Gerald
Gerald
Wilson,
Wilson.
where he says jazz is in a state of constant evolution and revolution. Man, if that's got to be put in gold and put over. These people don't know that I'm in your office with everything you've done here on these interviews, but that's where we are. This is ground zero for that. But what happens is you get this okay to use these techniques, which change the game of harmony. So this messiaen, now with that in mind, guys are doing all kinds of things. I remember at a Jamie camp, and Dave gets into this, superimposing chords on top of other things, but I remember like years ago, trumpet player, great trumpet player, oh gosh, I could see it. Tim Higgins, great trumpet player. And we were outside, this is maybe 30 years ago, and he's and I was with someone, and somebody says, "What are you doing, Tim?" And he goes, I don't know, and he's working on something. So we're just letting, he was doing something. And Tim was like ahead of everybody. And I forget who I was with, George Bouchard, I think. He said, "Tim, what are you doing?" And he goes, "I'm trying to figure out how to use the first 4 bars of Stella by Starlight over B-flat blues and then resolve to the 5th bar." Mm. And if you can create properly over it and get a great shape, you get this great line. And he's in his head, he's hearing this. And then you hear him play, it's like, whoa. So if you don't know what they're working with, it's all a big mystery. But a lot of it can be explained by someone who can explain it, like a great teacher. So this messiaen scale is a scale that a lot of guys like to use. That scale is this, I think it's 3rd mode. That's C, D, E flat, E, F sharp, G, A flat, B, A flat, B flat, B. It's a 9-note scale. And when you use that scale, no matter what chord you pick, there are a larger percent of notes that are in the chord than out of the chord. Mm. And depending on where you lean on and how you resolve and what you stress, it gives your playing a sense of like a gyroscope, like wobbling in a harmony. You're almost out, but you're not out long enough, it comes in. Mm. So if you played that scale over a C blues, you would be, whoa, I'm back in, whoa, I'm out. It's kind of like this, almost like a drunken, and you can control it. You could be in and use the out notes as approach notes, or you can emphasize the out notes and lean on them more and make it wobble more. So it's kind of like, what's the theory of that scale? The theory, I don't know, it's like the wobble theory, I guess. When you use it, it'll tend to make it, and I think Lovano messes with it sometimes. I mean, now a lot of guys are using it, but when I teach this to graduate students, if you heard the tune, if you listen to that recording, because all those tunes are recorded, we recorded them all, you'll hear this. It just has a tendency to, like, well, what's that tendency? Are you thinking every little wobble? No, you're using a scale that will knock you out but brings you back. I don't know, does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Anyway.
If you were playing on Stella by Starlight, a tune that I always found pretty challenging, can you describe what's going on in your head as you play, or the instant before you choose what to play?
I think sometimes. I think maybe if I was going to, the more I play something, the less I'm thinking about it. I think it depends on where I'm at with the tune, or if I'm trying to do something different with it. But when I start a tune that I don't know, I remember that tune. I have a whole thing with that tune, because how some tunes have one scale that can fit over everything, a blues. I mean, not that you have to do that, but you certainly can. Summertime, there's certain tunes you could play like a certain scale and it'll fit softly as in a morning sunrise. They call that bracketing, where you bracket the scale over the whole thing. But Stella, there's nothing about Stella you're going to bracket. The 3rd measure, you're going to get hurt because it's not related to anything. So there's some tunes you're just not going to fake it. And I remember learning that tune. The first thing is when I first learned it, I thought of everything, because you could play around the melody and gradually get away from it. But when people play that tune, there's a lot more than that going on. I mean, you hear people dig deep into that tune, because I think that tune has like every possible chord you could find, except I think it diminished, and you can even squeeze that in somewhere if you cheated. But so when I learned a tune, like when I started that tune, it was like a kind of equated to like a neighborhood. You know, like the melody is the main drag, so you don't get lost. The main street to your neighborhood. Then you start looking at the roots of the chord and what the qualities like 1, 3, 5, maybe 1, 3, 5, 7, and that becomes more like the side streets. And then once I get comfortable with it, then you know maybe you think the scale that fits. Some guys think the scale that fits the chord. Some guys think I'm just going to hit a certain note when the chord comes up. Other guys will apply like pentatonics to it or whatever. There's a whole slew of approaches that you can teach. But the more time I spend with it, the less I'm thinking about it, to the point where you spend so much time in it, then it's like that neighborhood, you spend so much time in it, you know when people go to work, and you know when people are home, and you know when you could break in their house and steal their TV, because that's how well you know the neighborhood.
Nice analogy.
You like it? Yeah.
Yeah.
I have tenure.
Okay. Did you ever have, let's say, a jam session experience or somewhere where you were really embarrassed?
Oh. Yeah. In Miami, well, when I started playing, my very first lesson was with the metronome. Teacher had me with a metronome, so I didn't know that music lived without a metronome. My very first lesson, so I always worked it out, and I guess my time was pretty okay. I just was used to it. And I drilled all these different scales, but when I would solo, I would play the scales that felt good. I would play D and G and C on sax. They all kind of feel the same until you get into D flat, and when you start using those side keys, right? So I would just play the scales that felt good because it felt good. So I'm thinking I must be doing it great because I feel pretty darn good. And we were doing this jam session, and I asked the guy who was my roommate, and this was kind of late because I really didn't have, I had good instruction on the basics of the horn, but I didn't know kind of what I was doing. I was playing along the records, G Navis and Sonny Stitt, Blackbird, you could play one scale over that, so I found out what the scale was. I'm going up and, hey, I can play like Sonny Stitt, So I asked a friend of mine, I said, tell me about my playing. Be honest with me. I was feeling so good. I said, be honest with me. Tell me about my playing. And he says, well, he does that, which is like, now I realize that's a wind-up for the pitch. He goes, well, you have good time. I said, all right, well, okay, and metronome, all right, thanks. And he goes, and you have a lot of energy. And I'm thinking, all right, that's just complex carbs. That's all that is. And I'm thinking, and he goes, you play more wrong notes than anybody I've ever heard. And I was like, what? He goes, yeah, he goes, you have a lot of energy and you have great times. You have no idea what you're doing. I was like, what do you mean? What do you mean? And he goes, you just play what feels good. You don't play what fits. I said, what are you talking about? And he goes, I told you. You play wrong notes. So I started to tape myself. And because G feels great on the sax, right? G major scale feels great. I'm listening to myself. The band goes to A flat. Man, I'm ripping it up in G. I was like, oh my God. So I started to tape it. And I was like, I was shattered. I was shattered. If I thought I was a legend then, now I'm really a legend. So I'm thinking, oh my God. So I started to tape myself. And I realized, boy, he was right. I was like, don't ask the question unless you really want the answer. And I didn't want the answer, but he gave it to me anyway. I didn't think he was going to be honest like I asked him to be. So I started to tape myself, and I realized, oh my God, and like nobody's saying anything. If it's my degree was in writing, not playing. So I would just go and jam. And in a jam session, nobody's there to teach. They're there to just play and have fun. So I was like, oh my God, I stink, and I stink with good time. So with all, which means I'm putting in, and I have a lot of energy, so I'm putting in more wrong notes than most in the shorter amount of time. So I started to tape myself, and I said, I'm not going to play anything unless it's right, and unless it fits. And I had to play along records, and I remember I would tape myself, and I did it on Stella, because Stella was one of the, did you know, before I figured out what the chords were, that Stella, the F major scale, fit over the whole thing.
I'm going to use that.
You know, you get a lot of work with that. So when I realized what was going on, I tried it with Stella, and I had a slow track, and it was like E half diminished, A7, right there, and I was like 2, 3, 4, E, 2, here's A, 3, and I would listen, and I would play like a chicken, like plucking at a piece of corn, like every 5 seconds, but I wanted to make sure it was right. And then I realized, wow, I'm like neglecting all like the harmony. And that was embarrassing, but that wasn't a minor embarrassment. That messed me up. That really messed me up, which is what you need.
Did you go to the piano at any point to
Yeah.
like see the chords?
Well, yeah, because when I went to graduate school, it was for arranging and
Okay.
writing, composition, and everything was at the piano.
Yeah.
And that changed my whole playing, that whole thing. In fact, someone told me that whole scale fits the chord thing actually started for arrangers. And it was never like an improvisation technique. It was kind of grabbed later and used for improv, and that's when I realized if I was going to create a voicing on C minor, and this is the mode that fits it, then okay, then it's when you improvise on it, it fits. So a lot of my playing was straightened out from understanding of harmony, which came from arranging.
Okay.
Because you can't like ear arrange too much.
I was just going to ask you if you can you sit at a desk and write a chart and pretty much know what it's going to sound like?
Yeah. I mean, there's certain things. If I want to try something different, I would go to the piano.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe because you learn certain techniques and you use them and you know they're going to work. But if you're going to try stuff, for me, the piano opens it up. And I've been in conversations with people that say, don't use the piano. Other people use the piano. And there's Gil Goldstein put out that great book, The Jazz Composer. He interviews about 12 people in the back. Randy Brecker, I think Pat Metheny and a bunch of guys. And it's funny because one of them will say, I don't use the piano because if I don't use the piano, it frees me up. Next person, I love to use the piano because when I use the piano, it frees me up. So, right, and so all this kind of stuff. And I had a conversation with somebody in the classical area, and they said, well, Stravinsky used the piano. Stravinsky used to compose at the piano. And he got into the same conversation. So apparently this is like a conversation that's been going on since this thing has been invented. And not Rachmaninoff, Rimsky-Korsakov was Stravinsky's teacher. And the way it was explained to me was Stravinsky goes to Rimsky and says, should I use the piano? Should I not use the piano? And Rimsky's like, what are you talking about? I mean, he doesn't sound so like South Philly as that, but he goes, so what do you, look, you use the piano. You like it, so use it. I mean, who cares? Just figure out your way and like develop it. What are you worrying about these rules and these conversations for? Because he would play until he found an idea, and then he would lock it in and develop it. But so for me, I like the piano, especially since for me, I feel like it opens it up. Plus, I like it. It kind of relaxes me a little bit to just do it. But I've written things before because I know they'll work, and they work, and that's okay. But I'd rather like play at the piano until I get to a certain point with it.
I'm going to veer off to another subject. For you, are there good old days of jazz? Are there times that you felt like, gee, I think I would have liked to have been a player then?
Oh, well, now you're talking a whole other thing. Yeah. Well, I guess, yeah. I mean, I'm teaching right now. I love teaching and I'm playing, and I do like I love what I'm doing. I love what's going on. I love when I get a chance to play with the people I play with. But I remember being with Maynard. I'm going to keep going back to Maynard because there's so many stories. It's like you're talking 5 years of stories and the things that he said. And he had the Birdland Dream Band, and I said, boss, everybody's talking. Oh, he goes, why are you guys always talking about New York? We're on the bus. He goes, why are you guys talking about New York all the time? I said, well, that's where we're going to go. He goes, hey, everybody's talking about it. He goes, I know that's where a lot of guys are, but he says, everybody's talking about New York like that era's still going on. He's talking about Birdland and Three Deuces, Cotton Club and all that. And he says, because that whole thing lasted about 8 years. It didn't even last 10 years. And he said, and I caught the last 2 years of it. Like, he knew Bird and all that, because he had the Birdland Dream Band at Birdland. And he says, it was kind of the end of that, and then guys were going to Europe. Dexter went to Europe, Johnny Griffin went to Europe, Maynard went to England. But he says he caught it, and so to him, that thing was over, and whatever he was doing was like the new thing. But I guess those of us who grew up listening to those Blue Note records, and we love all that, and you tend to think New York is I mean, it's still like you're never going to find a place, maybe L.A., where there's so many great players. But you're talking about that scene. And he says, I saw it when it was kind of wrapping up also. And he goes, so and so I felt that we would play. And when I was really a baby, I mean, I can remember this. I don't know if I was a baby. Maybe I was a little past babyhood. I was into little kidhood. And my parents took me to see the Basie Band with Judy Garland at the Mann Music Center. And my mom said, see that lady in the red dress? That's Dorothy. Oh. And I was like, really? Doesn't look like her, But anyway, so she sings Over the Rainbow with Basie's band. So I heard that. Now, with Maynard, we would still meet up with, I met Basie while Basie was playing with Basie's band, before, because the band kept going afterwards. But, I was introduced to Basie. We played a gig together, met Woody. And through Maynard, Buddy, all these bands are still out doing it. But it was kind of leaving the room, but they were still playing, like the playing leaders, Buddy, they were still playing, and they were still playing great. But you didn't really know that the end of that era was kind of coming, even though you could see it when you're in it. It looks like it's kind of diminished. Looking back now, there aren't, these bands that would go out and you could play in these bands. They're not, they're just not around for people to do that. So I felt that that era that I look at, like I'm looking at this photo, this great day in Harlem with everyone on the steps, that was an era that I think all of us wish we could have been around, And when they talk about it, when Sonny Rollins talks about how he was right down the street from Coleman Hawkins, I mean, that must have been, we just dream about what that must be like, So, yeah, I think we would all like to be in that era. And I just felt like I was lucky to meet. When I look at that photo, there's quite a few guys in that photo that I've actually met. But when I think about it, how lucky I was to meet a lot of these people through Maynard's connection with that era, I just feel like we lost. We did miss the era, but I'm not dying to. I mean, you can't read. I don't want to go down that road because there's, it's not a happy road. So, but it is something I want to say I don't think about, but it is something I think about.
Do you have jazz majors?
Yeah.
So, are you able to give them advice on what their possibilities are after they graduate?
Oh yeah. Well, the ones that are serious, we usually have a talk right around the sophomore, junior year, and it's different for these the age that we're teaching now than it was for us. The advice that they can't do what I did, because what I did doesn't exist anymore. Go out in the big band, maybe get a name. I mean, almost everything that happened to me happened because I was on Maynard's band, and I maybe took advantage of it afterwards. Doing these clinics and all this business, it all came because people saw me with that band, and then you're able to keep it going. Most of us that have been on the bands, a lot of like when I think about the people I know who are doing things now, they either were with like Count's band or like Duke's band or Woody's band or Stan's band or Maynard's band or Buddy's band, And when these guys leave, they either go to Chicago, New York, or L.A. for the most part. And there's pockets of, like guys, and they've all had that kind of experience. So, but now that whole band thing doesn't exist. So when and I don't want to say it shouldn't, it just doesn't. It is what it is. But when a student starts talking now about, what am I going to do when I get out, I get them on in my office, and we look at YouTube, and I talk to them about how certain people have to. Well, you have to kind of design your own life. There's nothing that you're going to go to and join, and that's going to be your life in jazz. It does, you know, it's not going to exist. However, you look up, look at some of the people who are creating their own thing, and we'll pull up like you know, Leo Pellegrino, Too Many Zoos. He's a baritone sax player. He's playing in a right. He's playing with, and so I'll pull that up, and I know I sent him a neck strap because I'm concerned about he's jumping up and down, but he's But I said, look at what he did. Now, no one would think you're going to make a living doing this, but he put this up. Social media is a big part of it. You know, you get your stuff out there. You have to develop your own audience. You develop your own audience, so your audience comes and sees you. Where before you would play a gig to sell your CDs. Now you're giving away CDs to hope they come to your gig. Kind of, because it's so you have to have, you know, how do you develop your audience? You got to have an online presence. It's all the stuff that didn't exist before. Have a website, people start to follow you, people ask you questions, you answer them back. You have to be, you know, and I have a couple students that have gone out and been successful, but part of the work is this this online activity that's very much a part of it all. In fact, I've asked somebody, we have a music industry major at our school, and these guys that teach it are like, they're all about this thing. They're all about this online thing. And I asked one of the guys, I said, how do you get a record deal these days? Because the record deal thing, the way it used to work was different. You know, you had a name, like Sal Nestico, played with Woody Herman, great tenor player. Sal gets off the band, Sal's got recordings. Oh, let's follow Sal, you know, that's over. How do we do this? And he goes, well, the first thing I said, what do record companies even do? He says, if you came to a record company, one of the guys told me that the record company is going to look at your social media, see how many followers you have. And if you have enough followers, then I'll just create a real nice, slick, you know, video for you, and we're just going to post it on the followers that you've already made, and there's your audience. So if you have enough followers, you're more apt to get a record deal. Not that the music isn't that important, but it's almost not as important as how many followers you have. No one's going to listen to it and say, man, that's great tenor playing. They're going to say, who's going to follow you? Nobody. Well, then we're not interested. So I think, wow, that's a whole change. But they need to know that. And as a teacher, teaching something that is like an art form of, you know, it's an art form. And the society around it is changing so quickly, you can't look at it like the way it used to work, but it's doable, and there are some kids doing it. So some of my students, they get on it. It's not that foreign for a lot of them, and they have a big presence. And because now it used to be the club would advertise it, you would go and play, and you know, you get paid, and hopefully somebody would show up. But now they want to guarantee you that you're going to bring your peeps to the gig, right? So you have to guarantee like 35 people before you get, you know. But for some kids, it's not a problem because they're active on the social media, and that's a thing that never happened with that didn't even exist before. And when I had to learn that was I don't want to say it was a bitter pill, but it was so opposite of how I came up. But we talk about it and we look, and Colin Stetson, this fellow plays bass saxophone, and he sets up a loop. He does these concerts. It's great playing. It's unbelievable playing. Never heard of. Put it up there, and I have about 5 different people that I show my students. Look at what they're doing. This is what you have to do if you want to have a future in it. Because what I did is gone. It's not a bad thing. It's just it's what it is.
Yeah.
You know.
Fascinating conversation, Dennis.
I feel like I put a big downer on it.
I've seen you I've seen you in pictures with Gary Smolyan.
Gary.
Yeah.
One of my favorites.
I wanted to read something he said.
Oh, geez.
And then see maybe you can top him. Like a battle, like a baritone battle. He said, there's this misconception like, oh, I'm a jazz man. I play what I feel, man. And that's not what it is. Jazz is 4 things you have to hook up. What you think, what you can hear, what you can feel, and what you can execute on your horn.
Yeah. Well, there's no battle there.
There's no battle
Oh,
there.
no, that's yeah. I mean,
said
it's
it well.
yeah. You have to. I taught at so many camps, and I'm watching these guys teach. These Jamie Ingersoll camps. I keep coming back to this because these guys there's so many. Jamie, because it's a small group, he hires like 70 teachers, and I'm watching everybody teach, and I'm thinking, what's the similarity? Because, some people, they copy Clifford Brown, and that's all they've done, and they sound great. Or they do the scale fits the chord thing, and they sound great. Or somebody's crazy about pentatonics, and they sound great. And another guy will hit approach tones, like guide tones through the tune, and they'll agree with that, and they'll sound great. So there's all these different spokes to get to the hub of the axle, of the wheel. And I'm looking at this thing, and I'm thinking, what is it that's common with all these? Because if you look at the approach, you think you have to learn a million different things. And really, you have to learn just a few pretty deeply so you can work it. You can express yourself. Ultimately, it's about saying something. And the things that I realize are the same with everybody is, one, you have to play your instrument. Anybody who can play this music can play their instrument. You have the chord, scale, sound, like that technique, have that down. The second thing is, you got to listen to this music, which means an awful lot more than just listen to it, like the syntax. And somebody says, well, it's D Dorian. Okay, I'll use D Dorian. No, listen to Miles play So What. That's how you use it. So you can understand the theory of it like that. But to carve something like that out, to carve something like that that's now famous, you have to look at that. So it's listening to the music, knowing your instrument, and then applying everything to some kind of song. Otherwise, you have to apply it to a song. That's the thing that I found to be the same. Some guys do classical, then they learn jazz. Some guys never do classical; they just work on their scales, and then they sound great. But without listening, nothing works. Without playing it, nothing works. And without learning to apply it to a tune, nothing works. But Gary's right. It's and there's a lot of the guys used to do the Jazzmobile. See, I'm going to mess this up because I don't want to ruin this. See, for me to tell it to you, I have to curse, and I don't want to do that. So I'll tell it to you
Maybe
anyway.
we could put in a...
Would you? Can you do that? All right. So this is how the story was told to me. So the guys are doing the Jazzmobile in New York. You know the Jazzmobile? They can ride around.
Billy Taylor and all
Billy
that.
Taylor.
Yeah.
I think it was Frank Foster. Maybe it was Ronnie Matthews. I forget who was on. It was a quartet, and they're playing, and they're going around. So the story was told to me like 2 or 3 different times. So they start playing I Got Rhythm, right? And so it's Frank Foster, and Frank Foster. Frank is so great. He just tears it up. So some guy, now this is the story how it was told to me. So some guy gets up with a tenor, and he just hops up there, and of course, now Frank's in a weird place. Is he going to throw the guy off? The whole neighborhood's watching. They're all screaming. So he's stuck. You're all right, guys. So he gets up and he starts doing that purging thing. So Frank's probably like just playing it. This guy comes up, squeaking, and everybody's screaming and yelling. So I could just see the bass players. Oh, here we go. Let this play. And Ronnie says, oh, let's help me, get me to the end of this. And so when it's over, when the crowd's screaming, and it was just a bunch of, So one of the guys in the band says, man, what were you doing, man? And the guy says, man, I was just playing what I was feeling. And Frank says, this is the way it was told to me, Frank says, next time feel something at B flat, motherfucker. But now that's how it was told to me. So beat me, will you? Okay. I mean, if whatever. But that's kind of it, because these guys are, I'm just going to feel it, or it's just this.
Right.
No, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. This is like playing this, working on this, and Winton talks about it too. It's if you're willing to do the work, the solitary work of just over and over again and over again and over again. It's like pushing a Cadillac up a hill with your forehead. You have to gain every inch of it, especially if you go to the keys, you don't know, So, these great players are great practicers. That's the thing. Who was saying that? I was talking to David Baker. Boy, Dave was great. He says, you know what? Anybody can play like Coltrane. Anybody can play like Coltrane. All you have to do is practice like Coltrane. Not everybody can practice like him. Not everybody can practice 11 hours a day on F minor. F minor. Bobby Shue, great trumpet player, was with Woody's band when Woody's band and Coltrane's group was traveling Europe. So they're in a hotel. And in the morning, Bobby's telling me the story. He has photos of it. I'll send them to you. Bobby comes out and he's in the lobby, and some of the guys in Woody's band go, "Hey, John's practicing in the boiler room." So he looks down there, 2 or 3 guys in the sax section just watching John. "John, you mind if we watch it?" He goes, "Yeah, sure." Yeah, John's real sweet. You know, John was a sweet guy. And John had a couple jugs of water. He was in his T-shirt. He's in a boiler room. All this stuff going off. And they had a tape recorder, and he was doing his multiphonic thing then before anybody knew what was going on. So here's John, who's done like giant steps and played with Miles, and all the tenor players love him and know him, and all the sax players love him. And now they're watching him, and he's like, and they're like what's he doing? Like, they don't know what he's doing because he's already like miles ahead of everybody. So this is like 9 in the morning. So Bobby goes, he takes a look. He goes, "Oh." So Bobby goes out, meets some guys. They go eat, they go walk, they go sightsee. They're checking out some things. You know, I think they have like lunch somewhere. And he comes back about like 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock. And as he comes back in the lobby, guys are like running back and forth in the lobby because they're going, "I have to go. Hey, got to go check out John." He goes, "Oh, John, what?" He's been here since 9 o'clock. So Bobby goes, "What?" And so Bobby goes and he looks, and now the whole sax section and the word's out. John's working on something, and he's like, he's soaking wet from the spat down. He's practicing like 11 hours. And later on, it was like he was working on G minor. He was working on like, what is he going to do over, he's working on some stuff to do over like Afro Blue, because when they played that tune, it would go like 3 hours. Yeah. So that's what I love, because it makes these guys human. I mean, you know, it's not that they just played great, or it's not that all of a sudden they woke up and everything was great. No, they worked for it. Sonny Rollins, I practiced. He's got like notebooks all up, like everything he's trying to work on. They'd rather skip the gig. When Train lived in Philly, some guys would come to pick him up for a gig. You could hear him practicing. They knock on the door. He stopped playing because he didn't want to go. He wanted to. It was like a jam session. He just didn't want to go. And they, "Come on, John, we hear you." And he was just quiet. "John, come on." "Yeah, let's go." And they would go, and then you start hearing practicing again. Because he's going for something. It was more than just practice. That's not practicing. That's searching. Yeah, searching for something. That's like that's a quest, you know. And we played with McCoy in Japan, and that video you saw us in that outdoor festival. That was the thing. We took a train with McCoy and Al Foster, Eddie Gomez. And we were riding on the train with him to that spot we were playing in Japan, and McCoy was right here. He said, "Was John, did you guys talk about the music? Do you mind talking about John?" He goes, "No, McCoy was a sweet." He said, "John didn't talk about it much at all. He just started playing. He just put the right guys together." And he said, "He's just all practice the whole time." Jimmy Heath says the same thing. Bobby Shue said on the plane train had a broomstick that was cut with buttons on it, and he just do this thing. And here, so when you hear Train, a lot of people, "Oh yeah, I'm playing like Train." No, you're not. No, you're not. You copied a lick. Okay. You know what I mean? This guy's like, he's gone after, he's in another thing. But it was, I don't even remember what you asked me.
Whatever it was a good answer.
Oh yeah.
So
but, you know.
I enjoyed this a lot.
Oh,
today,
well, thank you, Monk.
You know?
I mean, I hope make me look thin. Would you? Can you help me out, Russ?
See if we have some magic on that. Okay.
Well, I hope it came off okay. I appreciate it. Thanks, man. This is great. And thanks
Pleasure.
for doing what you're doing, because, like I said before, these interviews you're doing are great, and it's going to be worth more as time goes on. You know, and already you have some priceless things in there. So.
All right. Thanks for adding to them.
Thank you. Oh, my pleasure. Thank you.